We are often conditioned to see healing as part of a duality with sickness. You have your sick state and you have your healed state. I prefer to think in terms of the wholeness, the holistic nature of all things, how everything is in relationship with everything else, everything's interconnected. So I find it tends to be more useful to think of healing as wholeness. The trap that I find that we often fall into in framing healing as the opposite of sickness is it puts you on this paradigm of fear where you're doing everything you can to stay well so that you don't become sick. You don't give in to the sickness around you. So the duality itself is kind of a Trojan horse of fear. And that also shows up in the paradigm of healing in the commodified world, the industry of healing, that tends to show up as a kind of fear mongering of, you know, do this regimen, do this kind of exercise, be on this kind of diet, eat these kinds of foods, drink these kinds of drinks in order to not be sick. So it's all still oriented toward sickness. It's all like chasing wellness and running away from sickness, running away from something that keeps you from being fully present in the wholeness of all things. In the wholeness of all things, there is wellness, there is sickness, there is homeostasis, there are triggers, there are wounds, there are scabs, there are ways to heal those wounds. There are all those different elements happening all the time. There's wellness in your personal universe. There's sickness in people you love. There are people who you love who may be dying. There are people who you love who may be in recovery. There are people you love who are in an optimal state of wellness. And all those realities are existing all at the same time. So that brings me to this phrase that came to me, faith monger. I was thinking of the notion of fear mongering, and all the videos and all the things in the news that are designed to stoke our fears, often referred to as fear mongering. And I thought, okay, where did the word mongering come from? What is it to be a monger? It's Killmonger and Black Panther. So the root of monger is a dealer, a trafficker, a peddler, a seller. The etymology of it has a connotation of selling whatever will make the quickest buck. He or she who sells whatever will make the quickest buck. And so it's no accident that monger often came to be associated with fear, because fear is what sells most quickly. Fear is what makes the quickest buck. Once the media discovered that, there's been no turning back as far as the fear and anxiety that is pumped through the airwaves. And so I thought, well, if you can monger fear, that means you can monger other things. And then that had me think like, okay, well, what's the opposite of, the opposite, the illusion of opposite of fear. And I thought, okay, joy mongering, love mongering, creativity mongering. And then I came to faith mongering. And the association that came to my mind, religion, which would theoretically be the place where a lot of us go to seek connection, fellowship, a religion being this place of refuge from all the fear and misery of the world. And yet, fear has this way of showing up. Live your life this way and follow these specific tenets so you don't go to the bad place, the place that everybody fears. So there is still this underlying fear, being God fearing. There are all these different ways that fear informs people's experience of faith, or their version of faith. A lot of people, not all, obviously, but it's a critical mass of underlying fear that belies much of organized religion, and the alternative, so-called alternative, new age, the spiritual realm beyond organized religion as well. There are different ways that fear shows up in that realm. Fear has a certain insidiousness to it. It can show up even in the communities that are presumably founded on love, like spirituality, religion, wellness, energy work. It's important that we embrace our own capacity to be whole in the face of all the fear that lives within us and is reflected around us. So that's where the faith mongering came from. And also, harbinger of wholeness. Okay, so there's another phrase that's popular in US culture, being a harbinger of doom. I did look up the word harbinger, and it turns out that it shares an etymology with harbor, like being a safe harbor, being a refuge, a place of lodging. And over time, the meaning expanded to include like the person who scouts, the person who becomes the omen, who scouts places of refuge for everybody else, like the herald, like, come on, folks, it's safe over here. That person's the harbinger. Harbinger of doom. But the phrase itself means an omen of death, of immense suffering, the bad things to come, the shoe that is to drop. Of course, I was thinking, well, if you can be a harbinger of doom, what can you be a harbinger for? It's so ironic that the etymological root initially meant to be a safe harbor, a place where you can feel safe. So to now have it be so closely associated within this phrase, harbinger of doom, it's it's interesting the journey that that word has taken in the English language, like so many words in the English language. But anyhow, so harbinger of wholeness. Initially, I thought harbinger of healing, but again, healing versus sickness. I wanted to release the versus of its duty, and instead think more in totality. Think in terms of embracing the whole of who we are.